Know, O Prince, that between the years when the oceans drank Atlantis, and the gleaming cities, and the years of the rise of the sons of Arius, there was an age undreamed of, when shining kingdoms lay spread across the world like blue mantles beneath the stars. Numidia, Ophir, Bithynia, Hyborea, Zamora with its dark-haired women and towers of spider-haunted mystery, Zingara with its chivalry Koth that bordered on the pastoral lands of Shem, Stygia with its shadow-guarded tombs, Hyrcania whose riders wore steel and silk and gold. But the proudest kingdom of the world was Aquilonia, reigning supreme in the dreaming west. Hither came Conan the Cimmerian, black-haired, sullen-eyed, sword in hand, a thief, a reaver, a slayer, with gigantic melancholies and gigantic mirth, to tread the jeweled thrones of the earth under his sandaled feet. Welcome to another edition of Bland Gaming. I'm your host, Deeb, and I am going to introduce you to my problem. I have a Conan problem. I love everything Conan. I've been reading his books by Robert E. Howard since high school, which, as many of you know, for me, was a long, long time ago. We're going to be talking mainly about the Modifius role-playing game, the 2D20 Conan role-playing game. While we're discussing it today, though, we're going to talk about some other Conan properties. There, we've got a Conan board game. I've got my sword, my Cimmerian sword, which was made by his father and stolen from him in the movie. One of my players actually he 3D printed me this Conan bust because it was the greatest Conan GM ever. So I know what I'm talking about here. Okay, so let's talk about what Conan is, what the world of Robert E. Howard built. Now look, I am not a Conan scholar. There are, oh my gosh, complete breach of etiquette here. Hold on. It's Bland Gaming. Drink of the day is Irish Death in a genuine, it is a genuine glass from Deutschland. So we're going to be enjoying Irish Death in our German glass here. Okay, so let's talk about Conan. So what the world of Conan is they were written in the 20s, I believe, by a writer named Robert E. Howard. And basically the chronicles of the whole point of the whole setting is it follows the adventures of Conan, who is a Cimmerian. And he goes across the world at that time, which I believe they called it Hyborea. Now look, I want to let you all know, I am not a Conan scholar. I'm just a big fan of the lore. I know that there's a lot of Conan scholars. As a matter of fact, what's really great about this game here is Modifius enlisted a lot of people who know a lot more about Conan than I do in the production of this game here. But anyway, so in this setting here, it follows Conan throughout, and he has all these adventures. He becomes a pirate, he becomes a raider, he becomes a barbarian, and then he eventually becomes king of the most powerful country in all of the world, which is called Aquilonia. One of the things that is really cool about is that it is heavily implied that this is our world prehistory, so that this world exists before biblical times. And what's pretty cool about the way that he does things is that there's a great cataclysm that shatters this world, and then you can kind of see where the cultures kind of wound up. Like, for instance, Stygia here is very Egyptian type of culture, where Shem is a very Arabic type of culture, very synonymous with what you would find in Saudi Arabia. Argos is almost a Greco-Roman type of culture. Zingara is more of a medieval Italy. Aquilonia, which is the largest and most powerful and civilized of all the nations, is almost like a medieval medieval France, while the Pictish wilderness represents kind of like the savage world, almost like a native type of area. And then we have to talk about Samaria here, which is where Conan is from. Samaria, it's heavily hinted, are like the Celtic peoples, Scotch and Irish. Even though Conan himself is described as dark-eyed and dark-haired, it's implied that Sumerians are a savage people, very much on board with Scotch-Irish type of people. So the thing that you have to understand about Conan, what makes it different from other fantasy settings, is that they're all humans in this setting. What's really cool is that if you are from Zamora, you are going to be a very different type of person than if you are from the Germanic and Numidian peoples here. So each one of these cultures is so incredibly detailed and so incredibly different that is what is brilliant about this game, is you're not sitting there and just going, okay, well, yeah, I'm an elf, and then I'm a dwarf, okay? In each one of these, everyone is human, but all of these cultures are incredibly vastly different. And then me and a lot of my players are very big into history, and the different take on history that Robert E. Howard has is really cool. Conan is a very dark and a very savage world. There are good people in there. It's kind of like the two things that Conan hates the most are he hates sorcery, because it's seen as a very corrupting influence in the world of Conan. And then he hates slavery. Despite what you see in the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's never really solidified in the books that Conan was actually a slave, like he was in the movie, in the 1982, I think, movie, Conan the Barbarian. But nonetheless, I mean, he detested it. And as much as he is a savage, he very much, he stands for, I mean, he has a pragmatic goodness to him, even though he's extremely violent. I mean, Conan would, there's a famous quote, I wish I could say it, I wish I could give it to you verbatim here, but the quote is that civilized men have a tendency to be much more rude than savage men, because civilized men don't get their skull split open for having bad manners. It's something along that. It's a great quote, and Conan is actually saying it in one of his stories. So, okay, so like I just said before, it's a very savage world. It's a very dark world. Sorcery in this world is generally seen as negative. It's almost kind of like you're playing with forbidden powers. This is not Harry Potter magic or Tolkien magic. This magic is it's necromancy, and even though Conan does come into contact with those who have harnessed sorcery and maybe use it for good, it is seen as, it always comes at a cost. It is seen as a very dark forces that mankind should not flirt with, which is why in a lot of his stories that you'll see, Conan is usually, the antagonists in a lot of his stories usually wind up being sorcerers, especially ones like necromancers. This cover on this board game, which is so amazing. It's by Monolith Games. This is like the quintessential Conan moment, where you've got the necromancer and the hordes of undead, and there's Conan just in the middle of it, and he's just, overpowering and using brute force to just to fight for the good and fight for what's right. But not to say he's not a brute. I mean, Conan is actually a brilliant general and whatnot. But okay, so let's talk about the role-playing game here. So you're role-playing in this setting here. The other thing that's important to take away from the setting is that one of the reasons why I'm a huge Conan fan and a huge Robert E. Howard fan is I'm a huge Call of Cthulhu and a huge Lovecraft fan. So H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard were pen pals in the 20s, and maybe even, it was in the 20s, because I think Lovecraft died I think he died either in 1930 or the early 30s. Anyway, the two of them were pen pals, and they shared a lot of their ideas, and it's implied that the world of Conan, it's not implied, I mean, it's kind of accepted literary fact that the world of Conan is H.P. Lovecraft world. So in other words, you have Cthulhu, you have Shub-Niggurath, you have Nyarlathotep, you have all these old gods in this world, but it's prehistory. So this is the same dark and horrifying world of Lovecraft, but it's in a very medieval prehistory type setting. So when you play the game is made by Mondifius, and they use the 2D20 system. When you play the game, the characters go ahead and there's an extensive character making process. Excuse me. I'm not going to go into the 2D20 rules. Whenever I try, and with these videos, I'm a very right-brained person. I am very story-based in my campaigns, and I inevitably wind up explaining some rule wrong or having to send out a correction video. So I'm not going to explain how the 2D20 system works. I will tell you that there are tons of videos out there explaining how 2D20 works. But anyhow, so in the game here, you go ahead and you create a character, and then your character, you choose the nationality that you want your character to be in, and then you also choose, there's several archetypes that you choose from, and then there's an extensive, I mean, this whole process, this was fun. Just picking little different parts of your history. As you can see, the artwork is just absolutely amazing. And it captures the feel for Conan. Okay, and this is just an example of some of the archetypes that come in the book here. However, because the process itself is so detailed, no two nomads are going to be the same when you wind up playing. They'll have very, very different backgrounds. And a lot of these characters here are right out of the books as far as out of the stories. Anyway, so then you wind up creating your characters, and just like any other fantasy setting, you decide language is a huge thing in this setting that my players found out too. There's no common language per se, so you have all these different nations and you have all of these different languages, and so you really have to figure out who can speak what and whether people are able to communicate with each other. I will say that when you make these characters are definitely epic level characters. There's a magic section in here. That's what I'm kind of I'm thumbing through this right here. And the way that the magic works is it is not like, if you can play spell using characters, but it comes at a cost. And it is not like D&D where you're going to make Gandalf the wizard, and you're going to have super powerful sorcerers or whatnot from the get-go. You're going to have a cost. There's going to be risk when you actually cast spells in this. And then the other problem, too, is that there are certain parts of the world, most of the world, sorcery is not very well received. The exception, some of the cultures like Stygia, or even in Hyborea up here, it's kind of a Russian type people. It's widely accepted, but most of the civilized nations do not, or even more so, the savage nations are not accepting of sorcery. And again, every time you cast a spell, there's a certain cost where you could have critical fails, and then your characters can wind up, the spells can wind up backfiring. You can wind up actually losing your character with some of these. There's in the main book here, as you can see, the book itself it's gorgeous, it's thick. It's got a little summary of every single of the different nations and tells you about the geography. And there's so much in here. I like to make up my own stories, so there is so much in here to help you kind of springboard your ideas. The other thing that I thought was really cool, this is a very cool little sidebar that they have for you. They talk about how each one of these nations is roughly based off of an actual culture when Robert E. Howard wrote this. So for instance, like Koth is based off of the Byzantine Empire. I talked about Numidians being Germanic people. That's the German Holy Roman Empire. Ophir is like a medieval Sicily. Anyway, very, very cool stuff how they link this to this. This is also a great help for you as a GM, because what it does for you is it allows you to modify your accents. So like when I'm playing Cimmerians, I have them speak in a Scottish accent. When I'm playing people from Nordheim or Vonheim, I try and mimic a Scandinavian accent to the best of my ability, and so on. Anyway, so it's extremely cool. There are definitely, even though it's primarily a human setting, there are ancient kingdoms, there's ruins everywhere. There's also a very lovely bestiary here with tons of occult-like creatures. Again, any of the creatures that you have in Lovecraft are going to be present in this setting. So you can have deep ones, you can have ghouls, there's undead, there's also, and like I said, because of the nature of the savage nature of the setting, it's very dark and very savage, very primitive. And depending, the other thing too that I have to say is that the setting is incredibly diverse. If you wanted a quasi Game of Thrones-ish, more medieval type setting, then you can have something take place in the more civilized areas of Aquilonia or Numidia. But if you wanted a kind of Arabian Nights type of feeling, then you could have it take place in Zamora. If you wanted it a more ancient Egypt type setting, then you can have your adventure take place in Stygia. And what's great about the setting, and this was one of the things that one of my players said, is that there's so much there's so much diversity, there's so much there's just so much possibilities of where you can go. You can do snow, you can do desert, you can do towns, it's pretty endless as far as a setting goes. It's a lot of possibilities. And again, I'm a less is more person. I really like the human-only setting because I think it forces you to create your character and be more creative in describing your character rather than just kind of rely on these demi-human stereotypes that come there. So I really love this whole thing. And my characters, my players, they really got into talking about where they're from and their cultures, and having we actually played out and kind of thought of a good story arc to make all the characters come together. And that's part of their national identity too. Like a lot of them speak in certain accents, and you'll find out that like if you're in certain parts of the world and you have, if you have a Stygian accent and you're walking around in Samaria among the wild peoples of Samaria, you're not going to be very well received. Anyway, absolutely brilliant setting here. The other thing that is really cool about this setting, and we'll kind of make our way over to this side of the table here, is that the setting here, the Modiphius has released a bunch of these books, and each one of these books covers a certain part of Conan's adventures. Like when Conan was a thief, he starts out as a thief, much like in the movie. He later becomes the king of Aquilonia, like I said. And then there's the time when he was a brigand, right? What's really cool about each one of these books here is it covers, so this is like a thief source book, right? But the thing that's awesome about this is it also covers the areas in which Conan, it kind of, well, okay, so you get new archetypes in here that you can use. So it goes off of, there's one or two kind of rogue archetypes that are in the main book, but this one really blows it up and allows you to make very specific ones. It has new story kind of backgrounds for your players. And then the really cool thing that I absolutely love is it goes into a specific part of this world here, over here. So we take this little area of Zamora, which is kind of like it's kind of a Arabian type of, but it's real seedy. It's a very underworld type of area, and it blows it up with maps, details, adventure hooks, pictures, culture. It's so awesome. So each one of these books here, whether it's the thief, whether it's the wanderer, whether it's the king, you usually get about two or three different countries that are blown up. And then it also talks about like for instance, in this thief book here, it talks about adventure hooks and thieves guilds and things like that, just little resources for you as a GM to use that is relevant to the book itself. Like Conan the King, for instance, talks about life at court, which, believe it or not, after Conan becomes king of Aquilonia, spoiler, sorry, he becomes king of Aquilonia. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that there's assassin attempts that are made on him. And there's heavy focus on Aquilonia in this book here. And then it talks about court, about life at court in this world. So if you are looking for a very Game of Thrones type of game where you have a lot of intrigue and stuff, just because this is a savage world, there are certain places where you can actually play this kind of stuff out. It's amazingly well done. There is also a couple other source books here. I refuse to buy all this stuff because I'm really not into this setting, as you can see. It's called sarcasm for those who might not pick up on that. So there's some other, and these are, each one of these books here, I just want to point out to you, is exactly like the thief book there. You have the mercenary, you have the barbarian, which focuses on the north. The scout is kind of like the wildlands, the Pictish wilderness. I believe the adventure is the Far East. And then the pirate is kind of like Argos and Zingara, and it also has a whole bunch of cool naval combat rules and ideas in there. So each one of these books, and I have all of them because, yeah, I have a Conan problem. Each one of these books has new archetypes, new rules for playing out these specific parts of Conan's life, and then also a whole bunch of... I have basically the whole world in detail within each one of these books. Okay, so they've got more than one. This is the only one that I bought, the Jeweled Thrones of the Earth. This is like an adventure collection. So it's got adventures in here. They're pre-written. They're pretty good. These are the good meat and potatoes. You need to make up your gravy and then spice these up a little bit. But right out of the book, these are actually pretty good stories here. And then amazing art, which this is one of the games where I actually scan the art in and show it to my players. Because this is one of the most well done. And reading this stuff, it is so entertaining just to read any of this, all of this. Just reading these books it's like I just get hooked on it. I just absolutely love reading this stuff. So Jeweled Thrones of the Earth is an adventure book that you can get. The Book of Skelos is a book about sorcery. Gets into more about the spells that you can get, and then also it has expands the spell book from the original book here, and then talks more about sorcery and its place in the world of Conan. Ancient Ruins and Cursed Cities. It's just really a source book where it's got a whole bunch of exactly what you would think. I mean, it's got examples for different cities and ruins that you can insert in your campaign at any place. Now, some of these are generic where they could go anywhere, and some of these listed in here are very, very specific about lands within the actual world of Conan. The Horrors of the Hyborean Age it's a monster manual, basically. So in it, you've got a number of different creatures that you can use, and most of them, not all, but most, it has beautiful illustrations depicting each of the creatures and stuff, so it's great. And then Nameless Cults. So the other thing about Conan, the world of Conan, is they have quite a pantheon of gods and religions and faiths. We go into there are good gods in it, there's Mitra. Obviously, there's the quintessential Crom, who Conan prays to. I'm not sure why, because Crom really doesn't care. But it talks about all the different available gods within the world of Conan. But then the thing that's really cool about this book as well is there's a section back here about the ancient old ones, and it talks about Cthulhu and Nyarlathotep and some of the classical Lovecraftian gods in this. So this was a great book too. Okay, so let's talk about what I love about Conan. And it's obvious to you that I love it. When I first ran Conan, I ran it by the book. Me and my friends, I played with a 6-player group, and we played for about 2 years. And we really, really liked it. I love the writing in this setting. The writing is exquisite. It is fun to read. It is well done. It is faithful to the source material. And it is, when you read this, I think you'll find that, I love Tolkien. I love Game of Thrones. But I love, I should say, A Song of Ice and Fire. But this is my favorite fantasy setting. And I think that when you read these books and you really kind of get all of this detail, I think you'll fall in love with it too. It's such an amazing setting, and it can go anywhere, and it can do anything. Conan is he's a quintessential anti-hero, but on the same, he's not the knight in shining armor type, but yet he always does the right thing. He always surrounds himself with good people. Now, let me approach something up front. I have said in previous videos of mine that I am not a huge fan of political correctness. It is important to understand that these books, this game, is based off of books that were written in a time where there was no political correctness, and the world of Hyborea, which is what this realm is called, is definitely a cruel and savage world that is not a politically correct setting. If you are someone who has sensitivities, or if your group are someone that have sensitivities to some of the more savage nature, or they have sensitivities towards the certain things that they may find offensive in this setting here, this is probably not the game for you. Modiphius is a lot of the published stuff that I read from Modiphius. They do have a tendency to embrace political correctness in a lot of their stuff. I am thankful that they did not do that to Conan, because to do so would, quite frankly, stray away from the source material here. I have heard certain people, certain reviewers, certain game reviewers and things like that, speak of the possibility that there are controversial topics about how Conan views the world, and it can be perceived as offensive to some. Conan stereotypes. He also he leads a very promiscuous lifestyle. But the thing about Conan is that he always surrounds himself with allies and people of good character from all over the world there. So Conan will talk about people, say, from Argos in a very general, in a stereotypical nature, but on the same note, you'll see that in each one of his stories, he's surrounded and he's surrounding himself with allies from really all over the world. The female characters that Conan comes into touch with are not helpless. They're not helpless. They are his allies. They are his equals in a lot of these stories. The Belit, who is the pirate queen, he very much falls in love with her. I don't want to spoil it in case you want to read the books and everything, but Belit is the captain of a pirate ship, and they're actually attacking this ship in which Conan is a passenger, and Conan is just fighting so hard that the two of them, they fall in love very much so, and she is definitely definitely Conan's equal in that story there. However, my point is that Conan, much like Call of Cthulhu, the setting itself is very dark and it's very savage, and it lacks a certain degree of sensitivity that some of our players might be more privy to in the current gaming environment. So if you do have players with particular sensitivities, then this might not be the right game for them. Okay, so let's talk about 2D20. I am a right-brain person. I do not deal very well with heavy rules-based type of systems. I would like to point out that 2D20 is an extremely successful, extremely popular system that spans a number of games. Dune uses it. Star Trek uses it. Obviously, Conan, the new Homeworld game, is going to use it. And it's very popular. And there are a lot of people that really enjoy the 2D20 system. After we played this system for about 2 years, my group just did not, it kind of collapsed our campaign. We were not big fans of the system. I don't want to slam 2D20 too bad, other than to say that it's a bit, I think the term is crunchy. It was a little crunchy for what we were looking for in a system. And what we had to do was, it had gotten to the point where we needed a break. We took a break from Conan, and I was wondering if we would ever play it again, because I was like, well, the system here, it just was not our thing. It was not our cup of tea. So I wondered how we would continue to play Conan and how, I'd get this whole thing to go. So we took several years off and we played other games. I'm happy to tell you that we have restarted our Conan campaign, and it is just going great. Right now they're actually trying to save a kidnapped princess up in Vanaheim up here. So a very Nordic kind of setting, a very Viking type setting. Right now they're in, the snow and fighting frost giants and things like that. So how did we do it? How did we come back to this? If it was just not our thing. If 2D20 is not our thing. So what we did is we took as you guys know, I am a Free League fan. So we took the Forbidden Lands. I am not a huge fan of the setting of the Forbidden Lands, but I liked the rules a lot. I am not a huge fan of the rules in Conan 2D20, but the setting is probably one of my favorites. So what I did, it was super easy to convert, because this uses the notorious Year Zero system that's so popular with many Free League games. I took the Year Zero system from Forbidden Lands, and it was very easy for us even to convert from the spell system here to the Conan setting. And what I did was we all went out and we bought the Forbidden Lands box set, and we have been running our Conan campaign using the Forbidden Lands Year Zero engine inspired system, and it is just going absolutely swimmingly. So the one thing I want you to understand, and the one thing that I want you to take away from this is that I love this game. I love this setting. I love the writing so much that even though we were playing a system that I was not a big fan of and that my players were not a big fan of, I still saw the value in this, and I said, oh my gosh, we still have to play this. We have to keep playing this. So we entertained the idea of kind of modifying the 2D20 system ourselves. But then again, once I had read the rules to the Forbidden Lands, I was like, this is an easy port. I'll tell you, you lose a lot of the detail in this game here. You lose a lot of the character backgrounds and things like that you have in this set, which made making these characters so much fun. But I'll tell you that when you make your character, something I didn't say originally when I was speaking towards that subject itself, is the characters in this game right out of the box are incredibly epic level, super-powered characters. And I think that was ultimately what proved problematic for my group, is that these characters are so powerful. We had 6 players that it was very difficult for me to design very good challenges for them. I have a lot of players that are very math-centered, very math-thinking type players who were able to look at certain skill sets, and they were able to boost their certain skill sets and create incredibly powerful characters. And as I tried to fight with them, especially with 6 of them around the table, with 6 players around the table, what wound up happening was I couldn't match them person for person, so I was just throwing hordes of enemies at them, and all that did was drag the combat out, and it just made it take longer, and it really didn't change the outcome or challenge my players as much. So we really had an issue with trying to make the combat system work in 2D20. 2D20 also uses a very adversarial type of... it feels like the GM is playing a board game against the players, and a lot of players love that. A lot of GMs absolutely love it. It's a hoot to get all the miniatures out and to play with the miniatures and to play the game. But for me, when I am GMing, I'm still kind of rooting for my players. I want to challenge them, and I want to give them a sense of danger when I am providing them challenges. But on the same note, let me give you an example. Like when I am looking at my adversaries and I go, okay, well, there's this palace guard here. I don't look at his stats and go, well, this one here, this is going to do the most damage, and this is the weakest character, so he's going to target this guy here. I'm not sitting, I do that when I'm playing miniatures games, but I don't do that when I GM. When I'm GMing, I put myself in the NPC's shoes and I say, well, this guy's actually not going to mess with that guy because he's the biggest and he would be the most scariest. He's going to actually go for this person here because that's what I think he would do in that situation. And so because of that, tactically, sometimes I had a hard time keeping up with my players. I had to often talk with my players and say, hey, do what you think your character would do, not what statistically makes sense for you to, what is the most combat efficient thing for you to do according to your character sheet versus what do you think your player would do? And so I think that the more narrative based system and yet the extremely streamlined version of the Year Zero engine that we see in the Forbidden Lands suits my GM style better. But I will tell you that you miss a lot of the wonderful detail and a lot of the wonderful character descriptors and whatnot in this setting here. You lose it, and we are losing it when we switch to this game here, to this set of rules here, I should say. And you lose a lot of that when you do leave this behind. So my advice to you in closing, I think, would be go out and buy the Conan setting, but I would encourage you to try the 2D20 rules first, see if it fits your playstyle, because like I said, there are tons of people out there who swear by this system, who absolutely love this system, and it is a very highly recommended system among the gaming community here. It's a very successful system, which is why there are so many Modifius products that use that system. But if it doesn't work for you, I will tell you, still buy these books and then just pick up the Forbidden Lands set. It's an easy system and it's super easy to convert. I would imagine, I don't play 5e, but I would imagine that this is probably a very easy convert to 5e as well, if that's something that you would rather do. If you, like me, if the 2D20 is just not really your cup of tea. So anyway, that is Conan, my good friends, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks again for tuning in to the most boring and technically inept channel on the internet here. I'm Deeb, your host. Thank you for joining me on my horrible addiction. I have a terrible Conan addiction. I have a Lovecraft addiction. And I really can't recommend it enough. Go give this, put your D&D down, and go try Conan. Give this setting a try. You will love it. You will just, at the very least, go and read this or pick up the PDF and read it. And if you don't love it, then the next time you're on the West Coast, if you run into me, I will buy you a Frosty at Wendy's, okay? So if you buy this and you don't love it, and you run into me somewhere, and you somehow recognize my watch, my freckles, or my voice, and you corner me, I will buy you a Frosty if you don't like Conan. But if you love Conan, then you have to buy me a beer. That sounds fair to me. Anyway, this is Deeb signing off. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you at the next one.